the non-represented and public safety non-represented pay plans by adding 6 additional 2.5% steps to the top end of each grade and increasing the top end of the executive pay plan by 24% for grades 21 through 24 and 33% for grade 25. We'll go ahead and do introductions, starting with Mr. Johnson.
Zach Johnson.
Karen Bronga.
Scott Meyer. Daniel Bolland.
Anna Brawley.
Christopher Constant on the phone. I believe we have Mr. Salt.
Randy Salt here.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on the phone, Mandy? No. Okay, thank you. And from the administration?
Alden Thurn, CFO.
Tyler Andrews, Human Resources.
Kent Colhayes, Municipal Manager.
All right, thank you. So this is an administration that's going to be led by, or excuse me, administration. This is a work session that's going to be primarily led by the administration. I'll still run the meeting, but you have a presentation.
Yes, we do.
Mr. Andrews, you have the floor.
I'll just ask you to advance. Does that work? Thank you. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. Go.
Assembly Constant, Chair Constant. I'm going to make just a few statements of how we kind of got here.
Mr. Thurn,
So-
you have the floor.
Thank you. So, the administration and the assembly for many months now have been, talking and discussing recruitment and retention problems throughout the entire municipality of Anchorage in all levels of the organization, including the groups that we're going to be talking about here today. This has been a long-term conversation for all of us being able to look at this. We brought this memorandum forward in January, and the assembly then postponed it till this coming on Tuesday so that there would be an opportunity for the administration and a group of the assembly leadership membership to meet with us, ask some questions and so forth. So we met a couple of times with member Zalatel, member Brawley, and Mr. Constant was invited as well. Came in there, we gave our discussion on what was in the proposal, some of the justification for that. They asked a variety of different questions and some additional information over the course of these different meetings that we had. So we prepared that, presented it back to them, and then their suggestion was to do a work session where we do kind of a summary of what that additional documentation was so that we can provide the rest of the assembly with some backup information on what our rationale was and what the marketplace is exhibiting for these particular groups. So we've had, I think, really good conversations with the assembly on this mutually shared goal and challenge that we're experiencing. And then we're going to kind of go through each of the different groups and what we're trying to accomplish here, and then answer any questions that you may have. Okay.
All right.
Mr. Andrews, go ahead.
Thanks, Alden. And yes, we appreciate the work that we had with the assembly, and it was very helpful. So our overall concept here is to address the issues of retention and recruitment. You will find that our proposal or our concept is, we think it's effective, but it's also modest and careful, having to be mindful of balancing, trying to achieve the goals around recruitment and retention, but also being thoughtful about the kind of money we have. So the first slide is just some introductory stuff. We like to make sure you guys know that we did our homework. One of the first things that we want to talk about is, next slide, please. Let's understand the non-represented pay plan. So who are non-represented, or what are non-represented employees? Those are folks who do a lot of professional and supervisory work. They're not in a union, and they're not in the executive service pay plan. The non-represented pay plan is made up of 6 steps that are 5% apart. So 1 through 6. And you can see right now that 217, as of the snapshot we're showing here, were what we call stepped out. They are not eligible for another increase other than some kind of cost of living increase approved by the assembly through the budget process. So they don't get any more raises. So one of our proposals is to add 6 new steps to this salary plan so that we can provide some headroom some retention headroom. So people who've been long serving can still see some additional steps in their future. We think that's important. And these 217 folks of this snapshot are the only people associated with our proposal that would be getting a near-term pay increase associated with whatever effective date you all choose. So I just wanted to get that out there for some context. I'll probably refer to this slide again a bit later. Okay, the next thing is, how do we behave as an employer? So 2 slides, next 2 slides. Thank you. All right, there we are. How do we behave as an employer when we're hiring people into these non-represented positions, and how do we set their pay? Well, what this graph here shows is that we lean on 40% of the time, we appoint people at the first step, the lowest step in the plan for their grade. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means one of 2 things. It means they're probably relatively new in their job. They are not at the journey level, or it means that that we had a pretty good pool and quite a number of people to choose from. But what you'll see is in this graph, you can see that we are very hesitant to use the personnel rules that allow us to get pay set for a new hire in steps 4, 5, and 6. We use those very rarely. One of the features of our proposal is that the personnel rules will allow us to use these steps for initial hire. So Member Zolotal asked me repeatedly, Tyler, why aren't you changing the lower steps? We're leaving the lower steps in place the way they are as a recruitment tool, so that when we get a more experienced person, we can offer them more steps on initial hire. Likewise, if we get someone who's more of a trainee, we still have the lower steps available for them as well. So that was the thinking. Additionally, as I said, our proposal is designed to minimize the number of automatic pay increases because we're trying to be judicious with the plan. So I'll probably refer to this again, but it's really critical for me to help you understand that we want those lower steps left in the plan so we can use those for various recruitment activities and take advantage of the existing personnel rules. All right, next slide, please. We're going to do a little bit of market data. This data comes from the Alaska Municipal League survey that we participate in on a regular basis. And the comparators that we're using here are the cities of 30,000 or more. Obviously, we're the largest municipal entity in the state. These are our closest comparators. So next slide, please. Let's look at the left-hand side. These are some benchmark positions for non-represented employees. So we're looking at accountants, human resource specialists, librarian, engineer, and planner. And the key thing here in this slide is we are below the median in every one of those benchmark positions as compared to those other employers. In some cases, like accountant, we're almost 22% below the median. And in the better spot with the planner, we're 1.6. But this is a typical story across all the benchmarks for our non-rep positions. Now let's focus on the right-hand side of the slide. You hear me use the phrase executive service because I want you to understand that's more than just 26 people that report to Kent or the 16 people that report to the mayor. There are a lot of people in the executive service that do professional level work that aren't political appointees that you guys don't approve for confirmation. Administrations year over year for many decades have created positions in the executive service. My point is we have a lot of workers here, like, for example, all the people at the Emergency Operations Center, they're in the executive service. Do they really fulfill executive sounding roles? No, they don't. So we need to take care of that group as well. And what you see here across a number of benchmarks, so we're looking at assessor, treasurer, our equivalent of public works director, parks and rec, our equivalent of manager of administration, human resource director, finance director, planning director. In all those cases, we are below, again, the market. And in the worst case, like the assessor, 18.6%. And in the better case, in the planning area, a negative 5.6. So when you look at the other municipal employers from that survey, this market data tells us we're lagging, right? Any questions? Can I stop now? Anybody? Sure.
Ms. Bronga.
There was a slide a couple back that, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what the orange was versus the blue on the bars.
Oh, it's rehires versus brand new hires. And the rehires, it's not really a
Oh, I see
super
that.
significant part of the population.
Gotcha, thanks.
Yeah.
I have a question on your slide there, the non-represented jobs.
Sure.
I'm curious, what status of librarian? Is that any of the librarians or all?
We focus, so the survey picks, goes out, you ask the various employers to submit their data and to qualify what type of librarian they're talking about. So I would consider it to be kind of a journey level librarian. So it's somebody with all the certifications, the appropriate degree, all that stuff. So
Right,
it's meant to be.
Effectively, do you know how many fit in the classification for us at the Muni as librarians who are in a non-represented position?
I do not.
Could we get that information?
Okay.
Because to me, that seems like it's probably a score of people or more. It argues, why aren't they in one of the bargaining units? So
Yeah.
I would love that info. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Next slide, please. Oops. Oh, this was, I just wanted to show you the amount of effort it takes to kind of remanufacture the whole, to take the data from the survey and then put it into something that's usable in the barcode. So this is what the treasurer analysis looks like. I didn't want to bore you with 60 of these. So this is just a small example of the effort that Ron goes through to get us the data. And it's a nice graphic representation of the lag in that particular job class. It's just for fun. Anyway.
If I can add something to that as well, the black line is the median. That is not the highest in the state of Alaska. That's just the average of the group here. So there are equivalent number of people that have a line significantly higher than that, and some people have it below it. We tend to be the lowest, but the black line is not the highest in the state. It's just the average of those 5 or 6 municipality cities that were done.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, just real quick on this in the previous slides. When I'm looking here, you're talking about where they compare to the median salary for other public employees in these municipalities?
Correct. It's the median for those comparative employers.
Okay.
So we took them, right, and created a median about them. So we're comparing ourselves to the whole group, not to any one individual organization.
Okay, thank you. And then it was the same for the previous slide, right? I mean,
Right.
So we're just talking about where they compare to others in the public sector. So like accountant, obviously there's a lot of them in the private sector as well.
Oh,
We're not
sure.
looking at how
Yeah,
our employees compare to those. Just those
correct.
who work-
So in a lot of salary analysis, one good way to start out is you go and look for who is most like me, right? And it's kind of the onion thing. And each layer of the onion, they get less like me, right? And so like me means size, location, type of organization, government versus private. And of course, there's always interesting and relevant stuff about each layer of the onion. But as you get to the outer rings, the comparison gets less and less useful, right? So you start to compare yourselves to like cities outside of Alaska. Well, are you really competing with them? And you can find a city that's our size. There's about 29 of them, but they live in different metropolitan areas. So is it really the same thing? So we chose this because it was available data that we had participated in quite a bit, and we felt that had a high degree of relevance. So I'm ready to go on to then.
If I can just add another point, Mr. Johnson, that prior table there, as said, there's a table for every one of the ones we did. It was just suggested rather than going through 40 or 50 of them, they all show the exact same thing for the different. That's what the prior slide was just a snapshot of half a dozen of one and 8 of the other. But we have individual similar like pages that they all show almost the exact same thing across them. But as Tyler said, we didn't want to just have a massive pack that showed the exact same thing. So they just summarized it on one table.
Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thanks. I do appreciate the comparison with other jurisdictions, and I guess I'm unfortunately not surprised that they're different. I do want to point out that both Matsu and Kenai, for example, don't have their own police force. So there is also the trade-off of what you pay for, and we pay for a lot more as a city. Thanks.
Just a quick question. That City of Fairbanks, do they not have a treasurer or did they not report?
It could have been either one.
Something like that.
It's,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah.
I think.
Okay, can I continue?
Please.
All right. So this is what the proposals look like as tables. So next slide. So this is the executive proposal, and we provided the current table and the new table. The current table is the one on the top. And as the chair said during the introduction, the increases here are 24% of the table. I'll explain that in a little bit. And then 33% for grade 25. And what's happened there is grade 25 did not have the same spacing in the old table. So the 33 is kind of a correction. We'd like to make sure that we position that one well. So now this is a great opportunity for me to talk about how the table works and get your concerns about making sure everybody knows this is not a 24% pay increase for anyone. What this is additional capacity, additional flexibility for any executive, be that this mayor, the new mayor, any municipal manager, be that Kent or someone else. This is the flexibility for recruitment, for retention, for these key positions in municipal government. So again, this is not a 24% pay increase. All we're doing is building capacity, what I call headroom, into the plan. Now, what's the limiting factor on this? The budget process. So between the executive and the legislative, when people add or use this to increase pay, they have to be mindful of those things, and you all have to have your discussions and all that stuff. So what I'm asking you to do is add capacity. I'm not asking you to give anybody a 24% pay increase. All right. Oh, by the way, why am I asking? Because code says that that is a function of the legislative body to authorize the change in the table. That's why we're here, by the way. So questions about the executive service pay table changes. All right. The next slide, please. The non-represented service, the blue on the left is the current table, and the pale yellow on the right are the 6 additional steps that we would like added to the table. We believe that will give us some retention and some recruitment capacity. Those steps are 2.5% on the right. The ones on the left are 5%. So we think this will help us quite a bit. We want the flexibility to use the blue steps for initial hire. I think that'll be helpful. And it also provides the retention improvement. Again, I just want to go back to right now, if you choose an implementation date, for example, of January 1 of this year, we estimate approximately 217 people will have a merit anniversary date this year that results in moving to step 7, right? Obviously, if you look at this and you're concerned about the cost and you delay the implementation date, then that cost will move to 25 and we'll deal with it then. I believe I can speak for everybody sitting here and the mayor's office. We would advocate for, I seldom come here to advocate. We would advocate for a Jan 1 implementation date if that's something you all can approve. 24. Yes. So thank you, Alden. We'd like to have this capacity as soon as we can for the non-reps, and we think that would be helpful. One
I
more
have a
slide,
couple
please.
questions here.
Can I get that last slide?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. So this is one part here that we are also proposing adjusting the public safety non-reps. This is to maintain our competitive position with our own bargaining unit folks, as well as with the other major competitor in the law enforcement area. So this covers the lieutenants and captains and the various non-reps in AFD. So we're adding some steps here, and the communication we had with Member Brawley and the vice chair was that they were favorably disposed to this, and we think it's necessary for our law enforcement. So, right. Okay.
If I can add on this particular one, if you remember, back in January, they got their increase to be, so they would be comparable to the APDA contract. So this table is just getting the table flexed for use in the future years, but there is no budget impact in 24 because of this, because that decision was already made in January and incorporated into the budget discussions at that point in time. There's no new 24 impact because of this particular table.
No new impact because of this table, because they've already been increased. Thank you.
And and Tyler can correct me if I'm wrong. So then at their next anniversary date, they will look at what the person's current hourly salary amount is, and then they will be placed on this schedule at the next higher amount one. And then at that point, on their anniversary date, continue through at that point. But they don't get placed right now on there because they've already been given their increase for this year on an off table type thing. But then the table will exist, and then when their next anniversary comes up, they'll be placed on the next higher step that is above what they're currently making.
Correct.
Okay, Mr. Sultan and myself in the queue. Mr. Sultan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just have the question, did you consider any kind of, I guess, out of the box retention program? So I know at one of these work sessions we discussed, maybe you hold back, or when you give a 10% increase or something like that, that's continually vested over a 5-year program. So after 5 years of initial service, any employee that leaves the municipality has a basically 5 years of vested salary at any time that they would lose. And that might help retention. I think that was something Member Constant was familiar with as well. Just curious if you thought of anything outside of the box or other than just a pay raise.
We talked about a lot of different ideas, but our main objective was to, as you saw in the slides comparing us in the market, we're just trying to get back some market relevancy. I think adding and being creative is something that we can do after that, but we've got to get to the point where we're not lagging so significantly. Thank you all.
Yeah, I think when you see the table, Randy,
Nope.
that shows we're below everyone else in the state. It paints a pretty clear picture of part of the problem, at least.
Yeah, I agree. I just think continue to look for other advantages or,
Of course.
benchmarks of who's retaining people and why. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so I have a question. I'm going back to your slide that listed the non-rep jobs, executive jobs, and the differential under and over the median. I don't know what slide it was, maybe about the third or fourth.
One more.
This one?
Next one.
Keep up. There you go. So let's just start with the farthest one on the left, accountants. So do we have accountants that work for the municipality that are represented and unrepresented?
We do.
Yes.
We have
Why
8 non-rep and AMEA.
8 non-rep?
No, non-rep and AMEA. You said, are
and
there,
8 total.
not numbers, just the words. We
I'm
have,
sorry.
we have members, we have employees in the AMEA bargaining unit, and we have employees in the non-rep bargaining unit who are in the
Okay.
accounting department.
Okay, so great. We do have accountants who are in both AMEA and non-rep.
Yes.
So what does this pay scale increase that's proposed do to accountants who are non-rep versus accountants who are rep? Do we have equitable pay for those positions across the two divides, or the one divide, the two sides of the divide?
So, we have to be very mindful of salary compression, where if you don't raise everybody kind of at the same time, people will end up making more than their supervisors and those kind of things. So a lot of the non-rep positions would tend to be the higher ranges from a, like the deputy controller, for example. That's a non-rep accounting position versus, let's say, a grant accountant or something like that. That's an AMEA position. I think it deals with this group right now that are in the non-rep category. We're well aware that at some point here, we're going to need to take a look at AMEA as well. But I think, as Tyler probably could say, we're trying to get through the current unions that are in bargaining with us right now, but we are absolutely, pondering and starting to consider what we need to do and potentially do with AMEA in the future. But this is 3 groups at one time that are not members of bargaining. People with contracts already have in existence. They're already out there. You would have to do like a midterm reopener or something like that. So
When do we bargain AMEA?
Right now, they're under contract.
Not
So-
when do we, when did we? When do we conclude that process?
Oh, gosh, would have been,
Like last year, right?
I think it's older than that, a little bit older than that.
I thought it was last year that there was a 1.4% increase that they.
Yeah, but it was done before the plumbers and before the Teamsters. So.
Okay, so, I am interested in seeing a differential between those in a bargaining unit and what they're being paid to these increases. So to see the differential, and then you can add, if possible, if you have time, your rationale for why, like one was stated, that you got to have supervisors paid more than the employees, otherwise people won't promote. Whatever those rationales might be, it would be important for me to be able to see why we're taking one section and a bunch of employees that have similarly situated conditions, and those in a unit are kind of bound by a lower rate, don't have the higher scales, and then we're offering. So, and then maybe some position that states, yes, we will address these things as they come around. I think that's an argument that we can consider. So that'd be helpful. Thank you. Other folks, questions? Ms. Brawley? If not now, then when?
Okay.
I think the questions have ended. So, I mean, unless there are other points from the administration you want to make.
Well, I think to your previous questions and comments, first of all, whatever we do here, we have to be mindful of it. And I think we are. And when I say we, I mean both the executive and the legislative branch, how things that are done here influence the things we have to do with upcoming bargaining, particularly in this case, AMEA. I think it would be foolish to pretend that that wasn't a relevant thing. In addition to that, one of the differences that they are graded differently. So kind of to Alden's point. There will always be some differences just based on the grading within the structure.
And that's why seeing
Yeah.
a differential and then
Right.
having a rationale and then a
And
path forward would be great.
And then the one other thing I want to point out is this, like I said, we're trying to be very careful, strike the balance. So what happens here is we're adding 6 2.5% steps. this is not we are not making up that 21% differential, right? Because 62.5% steps is 15%, right? Over 6 years. I think that keeps us relevant. That's what we're seeking to do. And we're seeking to be careful. But these are not, I don't want anybody to think these are huge pay increases. They're not.
Right.
So-
From my point of perspective, I'm not assuming any of these are increases in direct one-to-one increases of expenses. It's just opportunity. And so the question is the opportunity equitable and fair? To me, that's an important piece. So anyone else? Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to briefly share kind of some of the things that came up in our meetings. So first, just to say thank you so much for all of your work to the folks at this table, as well as Sharon in the back. I know we had conversations, and thanks for answering our questions and looking at this. So I think where myself and my co-chair Zalatil, I know she's not on the phone right now, but we coordinated about this, as we were talking to you. We definitely share the same goal. We want to see qualified folks at the municipality. We want people to stick around. We want people to feel like it is worth working for the city. And so there's a lot of alignment on that. And we understand that needs to be all the way from department heads down to the line folks, right? And so I think that the question about AMEA and other bargaining units really came up because the second this hit the agenda, right, when it was introduced back in, I think, January, we got a lot of emails about that saying, why are you guys looking at this and not represented? And of course, we had those questions too, and we brought those to the meeting. And then we also wanted to talk about the budget impact because, of course, as you said, it's not an immediate.
Deja
Nice.
vu.
Yeah.
Deja vu.
That's okay. So we understand that this needs to happen. But I guess my question, and I actually don't see Mario in the room anymore. So because my question really boils down to, does the mayor support this plan? And I bring that up because I'm thinking back to the budget cycle in the fall. And the proposal from the mayor and the budget overall was we need to go as far under the cap as possible, basically to save taxpayers money. And then what happened was the assembly added several amendments, some of which came from departments and came from things that people in this administration wanted and not just our own priorities. And so we didn't go fully up to the cap, but we went partway there. And then several things in that budget got vetoed with, again, the rationale that we need to go as far under the cap as possible. And so what I'm looking at is, I'm hearing this proposal from the administration. What I'm concerned about is that, again, maybe it doesn't have an impact this year, but that what's going to happen is that we come to vote on it, and then it becomes the assembly is trying to just raise property taxes again, and feeding into that whole narrative that we're overpaying public employees, which we aren't. I mean, the numbers clearly show that. And so I guess that's what I'm putting on the table because I am concerned about that. Because again, I believe we share the same goal, but when it comes down to what actually happens on the dais, it seems like there's two different stories that we get. One is that this needs to happen, and the other one is that we need to save taxpayers money. And I think both of those are true to some extent, but I am concerned that they are in conflict, and then it puts us in the middle. And so for me as the budget co-chair, I'm frustrated by that because then it feels like, us trying to do the right thing and then basically not getting the cover from the folks who brought it in the first place. So, and again, I don't know if anybody from the mayor's office can speak to that, because I appreciate, obviously you guys work for the mayor, but I think it is a fair question to ask.
Through the chair to Member Brawley, the mayor is aware that we're here. He's aware of our discussions on this. I met with him last week and briefed him on this. He's also been intimately involved in the discussions regarding the pay increases that were negotiated with APDEA and with the public safety non-rep position. So I would say, yes, the administration is supportive. I would also, if I may, Mr. Chair, offer on the exec pay scale, I wanted to make the comment that I don't think was brought up, that recruitment and retention is a big deal across the ranks. We know that. With the exec positions, it's particularly challenging because, as everybody knows, that a director serves at the pleasure of the mayor. And that is a factor that weighs in when we approach an in-house employee who may be interested in moving up to that additional level of responsibility and authority and get to do some fun things. Quite often we see situations where somebody who's in a non-rep 18 position would take a significant pay cut in the order of $12,000 to $15,000 to move into an executive position if we were to place them at the top of the exec 23 scale. So one of the things that this does on the exec side is allow, as Tyler said, some more headroom in order to attract some internal candidates. I can name two. I won't name the individuals, but I can name two departments right now where we have that exact situation. We have qualified candidates who have considered but have declined the opportunity to be appointed to a position. So thank you.
Go ahead.
May I add a few other comments to this? So, in many of these situations right here, what we are trying to do is add capacity, headroom, but not necessarily immediate increases. I mean, we've been trying to be very cognizant of that in the discussion here. We've already dealt with the range 2029, so there's no continuing first quarter budget ramifications because of that. You've heard about the executive group is there's at this point no intention. No one's going to get an increase on Wednesday because you proved something on Tuesday. That is not the intent of what we're doing. We're trying to provide all of this tool for the future to be able to recruit and retain. On the big non-rep one, which is the one that has the large number of people at the step 6, I mean, we're open to what the assembly wants to do with that. We if you want to make that effective in January 1st of this year of 2024, it's about $380,000 of 2024 expense, which would have to be obviously looked at and dealt with as a part of first quarter budget revisions because it's not currently in there. If that amount is unpalatable because of decisions on what other priorities are or and so forth, then you would just say that you want the new table to be implemented in the 2025 year, and then through the budget process in the fall, then that would be incorporated. We believe, given the recruitment and retention situations that we're having right now, it would be our preference that we make this this 2024, try to keep everybody that we can in this particular thing, and then deal with the budget ramifications during first quarter budget to make this happen. But I think the administration would be supportive of that, but we're open. The tables, what's important. The tables are what the assembly, has to authorize for us so that we can have the tools to be able to use them to the greatest degree according to the code and the policies in order to be able to, attract and retain people the way they are. But I think this entire process that we're going through on these particular ones is intentional, that we're not blowing up the budget and increasing everybody's pay 20%, and then we have a huge budget situation that we have to deal with here. I think in all of these situations, we've been very not aggressive, but give us the tools so that going forward in the future we have more tools in the toolbox to be able to use to recruit and retain people with budget considerations. So remember, Brian, going back to your question, I believe the mayor does support these things, and but I think the cost is kind of either been taken care of or we're fine with whatever the assembly ultimately decides they want to make as far as implementation date on that, although we would certainly support the 2024.
I'm going to ask a quick question. Is it your position then that we have roughly $383,000 in fund balance?
I believe we would be you have a tax cap, so we would have to identify what the tax cap is and be able, we can't spend more than that. So I think we would be evaluating all of the asks in first quarter, whatever the gap was between what the budget was approved and the tax cap. It would just be a factor that gets rolled into all those. We're not going to be using this out of fund balance to pay for this. It's a part of the budget process.
Okay, so said another way, it's the administration's position then, or at least the CFO's, that there is this kind of money available under the cap.
We would, if it was chosen that you wanted to make it 2024, we would, through the first quarter budget revision process, ensure we came forward with a budget that was balanced and within the cap.
Ms. Bronga.
I'm just curious. I was looking in the packet and there's a chart that has the grades on the left, grade 3, 4, 5. And then they don't have steps and I looked to see what a grade 3 was. It looked like it was an aid. So is it because they wouldn't be continuing at grade 3? It's kind of a entry level 1 year.
We don't really use those anymore. They're just kind of artifacts, but if we were, they'd be like interns and stuff like that. So it's not really a continuing employment relationship. It's not, we don't want anybody to retire as an intern. So
I was just trying to
Yeah.
decide if you would ever get anyone to take a job at that salary.
probably not.
All right, Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thanks. I'll add a couple kind of additional comments for members, just recapping some of the conversations we had. I'm glad you brought up the January 1st. I think that's something we talked about. The metaphor being everybody has a birthday in the course of the year. Everybody has a work birthday, right? Their work anniversary. And I know we've gotten a couple comments from folks through the public comment process saying, if I happen to have met my anniversary and this goes into effect April 1st, for example, then they would have to wait a whole other year. So I think regardless of what year, I think our recommendation is certainly January 1st, again, to be fair to everybody and making sure that can happen. As far as 2024 versus 2025, I think, that is something we can talk about because I know there's a much longer list of priorities of various kinds than we have room in the budget, and certainly more than we have fund balance for, even if they are one time. And so it's fiscal responsibility is hard, right? It makes you have hard choices. And then I guess the last thing I'll say are two brief things. One is thinking about the bigger picture. So the Assembly appropriated funding for a salary study. We intend to look at that because I think that there's great comparisons with our peers across the state. I think we also, given the nature of a lot of our jobs, we need to think about how we can compete with the private sector. I know we've talked about that with attorneys, with accountants. And of course, we're never going to be the most lucrative position, right? But we need to think about kind of how you entice people to value public service enough that they are not chasing the maximum dollar maybe that their qualifications would give them. But that's something that we want to look at and we will be initiating. And then lastly, I think this is part of the kind of the bigger picture discussion of what we do now, knowing that it has significant budget implications over time. And again, knowing that we are not paying people at the rate of our peer cities, most of which are smaller than us, right? All of which are smaller. And that we keep running into this conversation in our city about how do we balance the fact that our property taxes keep going up and expenses keep going up with the idea that our level of service seems to be going down, right? Or just trying to maintain the same level of service gets more and more expensive. And so I think that is, that's not something we can just solve with this, but I think that is everybody's responsibility in speaking with the public as well. And not just saying, how do we cut costs? How do we hold things to where they were 20 years ago? But really, how do we ensure that we're paying the level of service that we need? So, and I know we've continued to have those conversations too. So I think that really is something we're going to continue in the future with other issues. But I think it's a fair question to ask. Again, thinking how do we run a city of our size and at what cost? So there's no question there. Sorry, but
She's on a soapbox. And clean. So anything else? Anyone else? So this item is before us on Tuesday, and there will be a public hearing, and then from there, we'll see what actions are warranted, depending on what a majority thinks. So thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. It was thoughtful, and we'll be adjourned until 2:00.